Busch Gardens in Williamsburg, Virginia has been on quite a growth spurt recently, with Pantheon, an amazing intimate multi-launch coaster opening earlier this year, and an indoor family launch coaster, Dart Coaster, on its way for 2023. It is one of the most rapidly growing parks in America. This growth, however, does not seem like it will be stopping, as rumors are circulating about a new coaster for the 2024 season that might just become the best in the park. Rumors for a coaster after Pantheon started back in early 2020, when a coaster layout by the name of Drachenspire was leaked by a very reliable source. Drachenspire was a 350-foot tall Giga shuttle coaster planned for the 2021 season, and to be honest, this idea was just stupid. With a 300-foot coaster already being in the state with Intimidator 305, and Busch Gardens already having 2 swing launch coasters in the park, this coaster would not have been very successful. Whether this plan was cancelled due to the pandemic or if Busch Gardens realized the stupidity of the coaster is unknown, but one thing is for sure: Drachenspire is not happening. Now with that out of the way, let's get into where Busch Gardens would add a new coaster. The answer to this question is actually pretty easy, as it would more than likely go in Drachenfire's old plot of land in the Oktoberfest section of the park. This plot is right next to the Rhine River and pretty sizable, making it more than capable of fitting a large coaster. You may be asking, how large would this coaster be? Well, earlier this year, Busch Gardens renewed a 220-foot height limit in this plot, which could very well be for a new hypercoaster in this location. Now, under the assumption that Busch Gardens is adding a hypercoaster, let's go over some potential options. There are 3 coasters that I believe are the most likely to come to Busch Gardens, and let's start off by going over the coaster that I think is least likely to happen out of the 3. That coaster is an S&S Hyper like Steel Curtain at Kennywood. Before you click off the video thinking how stupid that addition would be, hear me out. An S&S Hyper could pay homage to the park's old looping coaster Drachenfire, and is pretty much the modern equivalent of the ride. An S&S Hyper would also be unlike anything else in the park and in the surrounding area. Although there are a few multi-looping coasters like Alpengeist and Griffin at Busch Gardens, an S&S would be more than different enough. This coaster would probably be made famous for keeping the iconic Drachenfire drop, and would follow the trend made by Big Bad Wolf and Verbolten of paying respect to past rides. The main reason why I find this the least likely of the 3 to be added are the problems that the only current S&S Hyper, Steel Curtain at Kennywood, has faced. Steel Curtain has built up quite the reputation for being a very unreliable and fairly rough ride. It has also faced long periods of downtime despite being a fairly new coaster that would probably drive Busch Gardens away from installing one themselves. The next 2 additions I think both have around the same chance of happening, however what I put as the second most likely is an RMC ground up hybrid coaster. With the recent success of Iron Gwazi at Williamsburg's sister park, Busch Gardens Tampa, will this lead to Busch Gardens adding a Gwazi of their own? Well, I think that is entirely possible. Let's look back at some of the trends between the 2 parks. It all started in 1976 when Busch Gardens would add Florida's first looping roller coaster, Python. After seeing the success of the ride, they would add a bigger and better variant of it at Busch Gardens Williamsburg with Loch Ness Monster in 1978. Then in 1996, it happened again when Tampa would add the record-breaking B&M inverted coaster, Montu. Then after the success of Montu, Busch Gardens Williamsburg would add Alpengeist in 1997, which broke all of Montu's records and still stands as the tallest and fastest inverted coaster. This, however, was not the last time this trend would happen, as once again, in 2005, Tampa would debut the world's tallest dive coaster, SheiKra, for the 2005 season. And then you guessed it, Williamsburg would end up adding their own dive coaster of Griffin for the 2007 season. This would happen a few more times in the 2010s, however I think you all get the point. They like to trade additions. I think that there is definitely a chance that this trend will continue with a hyper hybrid being built in 2024, however there is one problem with that idea. Busch Gardens' main competitor, King's Dominion, already has an RMC hybrid of their own with Twisted Timbers. Although these attractions would feel very different, as Busch Gardens would likely stand at almost double the size, it is still something we need to consider. Now for what I believe is the most likely to come to Busch Gardens. I think that in 2024, Busch Gardens will add an Intamin hypercoaster similar to Conda at Walibi, Belgium. I think that an Intamin hypercoaster would be the best addition for Busch Gardens for many reasons. To start off, SeaWorld, Busch Gardens' parent company, has been working with Intamin a lot recently. In fact, there are 3 Intamins opening this year across the SeaWorld chain, with Arctic Rescue opening in San Diego, Dart Coaster opening in Williamsburg, and Catapult Falls opening in San Antonio. It would also become the first new-gen Intamin hypercoaster in America, as the only ones currently in the country are older from the early 2000s and feature very different layouts. The only real flaw I see with this would be Pantheon being in the same park. Being made by the same manufacturer, some people could potentially see it as a second Pantheon, However, if they were to avoid certain elements featured in Pantheon, like the Outer Banks turn, this issue could be easily avoided. Now that you know the 3 coasters I could see the park having, I'm going to give the chances of each coaster actually happening. I believe that an S&S has a 10% chance of happening, an RMC Hybrid a 35% chance of happening, an Intamin Hypercoaster a 45% chance of happening, and a 10% chance that something completely different gets installed. Anyways, that is it for today's video, and if you enjoyed it, maybe consider subscribing. I'm still a very new channel on YouTube, and subscribing would just help me so much. If you agree with my ideas, let me know in the comments. Thank you all for watching, and goodbye.